We love you. Father, we give you all the glory. You are my rock, my strength and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace and my shield. You are my everything. You are worthy to be praised. You are my rock, my strength and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace and my shield. You are my everything. You are worthy to be praised. Sweet Jesus, beautiful King, no Father like you, no friend like you. Your love for me is everlasting. No one like you, no one like you. Sweet Jesus, beautiful King, there is no Father like you, no friend like you. Your love for me is everlasting. No one like you, no one like you. You are my rock, my strength, my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace and my shield. You are my everything. You are worthy to be praised. You are my rock, my
All right, so good afternoon. This is the day the Lord has made to rejoice and be glad in it. Good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're watching us from. If it is morning, right where you are, I will say good morning to you. And if it is evening where you are, I will say good evening to you. And if where you are, it's actually currently in the night, I'll say good night to you. But then I'm welcoming you to the program today. So my name is Kuridelawi. This is the Seasoned Apologist Live. And in this program, we talk about apologetics. We talk about Muslim evangelism. We talk about Islam. We also talk about a little bit of polemics as well. So if you are joining us for the very first time, I want to say welcome to you. Now we're going to be talking about something very, very much interesting today. Now, you need not to be told about what is going on in the world today. We know about the Taliban takeover. We know what is going right there in Afghanistan. Today it started a couple of weeks ago, and then we see, the development as unfold and all of that. Now, there's been a lot of speculation. There's been a lot of anxiety, confusion, and people are asking a lot of questions. Who are the Taliban? What is their aim? What is their purpose? Are these guys religious? Are they political? What is their purpose? What are they trying to achieve? And how do they intend to achieve that? So we'll look at a couple of those things on Monday night when we brought in Dr. Tony Costa into the program. But a sequel to that is this particular program where we're going to be having in the studio Dr. J. Smith. Now, before I bring in Dr. J. Smith to the studio, if you've been watching this program, you'll be following us, you know who Dr. J. Smith is. But I'm not going to be reading his bio today. I just want to let you know that Dr. J. Smith is actually an apologist. He's also a polemicist. All right. He's been traveling around the world, teaching people how to actually evangelize the Muslim, but especially in the area of the Quran. He's been talking about the Quran for a while. He talks about the Quran, the book, and he also talks about the man Muhammad. And it's very exciting to have Dr. J coming on the show. He has, a lot of experiences, years of experiences in some of the things that he's been talking about. And currently, Dr. J is actually running a couple of courses. And by the end of this program, we're going to be talking about those courses as well. But then join me, brethren, as I bring Dr. J to the studio. Dr. J, how are you doing today?
Real good, thank you. Nice to have you back. I'd be back on the show again.
Exactly. And Dr. J, I know you've been, traveling all around, presenting lectures, and also be doing a couple of teachings. We're glad to have you back again. I mean, you are so busy. You're involved in a lot of things apart from the teachings that you do from your base. You also move around to teach people, and apart from that, also you're also running courses. I mean, you have courses that people are actually engaged in, and so we're so glad to have you on the program today. Now, Dr. J, before we begin to talk about who the Taliban are and a couple of things surrounding them, I would like to ask you, why do you think it is important for us Christians to talk about what is going on in Afghanistan today?
Oh, I think it's important for just anybody, but I think for Christians, because we are very much aware of where Islam is going. These radical groups that are confronting the world, they're also confronting the church, and there is a fledgling church there in Afghanistan, and it's right in the crosshairs of this particular group. So it's important for us to talk about. But obviously, I think today we're introducing this subject because of what's going to happen on Tuesday, coming up in 2 days. We want to make sure that the world and your watchers know and be ready and be aware of who these people are, where they've come from, what their agenda is. Because I'm listening to everybody that's talking about the Taliban, and it seems like there's an awful lot of misinformation. Hopefully, we'll try to correct some of that today.
Okay. All right. So, folks, we're going to be learning a whole lot today. We're going to be looking at things from, different perspective, different point of view. And of course, the reason why I'm also having Dr. J right in the studio to talk about this is also because of the years of experience that he had talking about Islam, especially radical Islamism, or radical Islam, as you might want to have it. And, we need to shed more light about some of these things. I know that there are a lot of fears in the mind of people. But then, even if you're going to be afraid, at least it's actually good that the basis of your fear. You're not going to be getting afraid out of ignorance and all of that. But then, Dr. J, before we get into some other things about these guys, because I know a lot of people wanting to be asking questions about the Taliban and some other things that you have in store for us, can we have a brief history, of who these guys are? Who are the Taliban? I know a lot of people see the Taliban like, another Islamic group, another terrorist group, and all of that. But can we have a kind of a brief background to who these guys are, and then we can pick up from there?
Yeah, and it is a different group than what we're used to. I think this is not ISIS. This is not Al Qaeda. This is not groups like Boko Haram. These are not even that Islamic a group, which will be surprising an awful lot of your listeners. This a group that actually predates not the Taliban itself, but the people from which the Taliban are derived. To understand the Taliban, you need to realize that the vast majority, in fact, almost all of the Taliban are made up of one tribe, and they're called Pashtun. And the Pashtuns are headquartered, or have historically always lived in southern Afghanistan and northwestern Pakistan. Interestingly, when the British created Pakistan and Afghanistan and India and Bangladesh in 1947, when they got their independence, it was a map maker there in London who drew the lines, the maps, the borders of these four countries. And I'm not sure what his name was. I'm sure he didn't work alone. He was with a committee, but he was more interested in rivers and ridges of mountains than he was in people groups. And so he carved the line of the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan right through the Pashtun tribe. And it's the Pashtuns who are the people who have never really been conquered by anybody. And they're highly, individualistic. They are also very proud people, and it's because of their pride and because of their history that we need to be careful when we are trying to describe the Taliban. I'm hearing pundit after pundit who is getting up and saying, this is just like Al Qaeda, this is just like ISIS. No, they are not. They are much older than ISIS or Al Qaeda or any of the more radical groups that are around the world today. And that's not to say that they're not Muslims. Yeah, they are Muslim, but they come from a tradition that predates Islam, that can be traced all the way back to, some say, as early as the 2nd century BC. So they're over 1,000 years old, this group. The Taliban themselves are much more recent. The Taliban are much more recent. But to understand the Taliban, you need to understand Pashtunwali. Pashtunwali is the ethos by which the Taliban work. And the Pashtunwali have been around. Their ethos, they have 13 principles, but the 3 major principles by which they work are actually quite, 2 of them are very admirable. One is called, I'm going to get the right name, Melmestia. Melmestia is this idea of being good hosts. They are good hosts to anybody that comes into their area or their village or their town or their house. The second category that's very important to them is Nanawatai. Nanawatai means giving asylum to those people, to the stranger, giving asylum to the stranger, to the point that they would even die and or kill to protect the stranger. And there is there's that famous incident. Oh, when was it? The U.S. Navy SEAL a number of years ago, who the Taliban had ambushed a Navy SEAL group, and this one soldier, Marcus Luttrell was his name, who had escaped. He was wounded, and one of the Taliban organizations, one of the families, found him wounded, and they actually brought him home to their houses. And when the other Taliban came to arrest him, they fought for him and actually, I understand, wounded others who tried to arrest him. They wouldn't let anybody arrest him because he was under this Nanawatai agreement that you protect those who are especially the stranger, and give them asylum. And then the third category, and this is the one that I think most people are concerned about, is what they call badal. Badal is vengeance. They revenge anything that has happened against them as a tribe.
Yeah.
The vengeance they talk about can go on for generations. This can go on for many generations. Now, there are 8 or so other categories. Sagara, kindness. There's Wapa, loyalty. There's Tura, bravery. There is Jirga. Jirga is interesting. Jirga is part of these Jirga courts. They have courts where they bring people and they try them, and it's done by elders of the tribe. They have also Namus, which is a honor of the female. And that's why they are so different than the other Islamic groups. You know, the other Islamic groups like the IS Khorasan. IS Khorasan is the group that's probably causing the most concern for people today, because they are people who have left the Taliban because the Taliban have not been Islamic enough, because they adhere to these other categories. And so you have IS Khorasan. Khorasan, let me define terms. Khorasan is that area that I'm talking about. Khorasan is what used to be southern Afghanistan and northwestern Pakistan. That was the Pashtun area. It is known as Khorasan. These IS group were formed in about 2015. So they're only 6 years old. And they were formed because of anger and disillusionment by certain members of the Taliban who didn't think the Taliban were Islamic enough. And so they split off from them and they moved over to the eastern part near around Jalalabad of Afghanistan, to the east of Kabul. And that's where they're headquartered today. And they are the ones that commit suicide bombings, not the Taliban. Make a distinction there. The Taliban do not use suicide bombings. The Taliban do not go and kill women in maternity wards like the IS Khorasan did. The IS Khorasan, Islamic State Khorasan, who take their marching orders from the Islamic State out of Syria and Iraq, now they're in the diaspora, they do attack women in. They are much more hardline and they are much more violent. The Taliban aren't necessarily that violent. Now, when I say violent, by what standards are we talking about? By the standards of IS, they're not that violent. By our standards, yes, they are, because they do have. They still follow. They adhere to the code that when someone steals, you must cut off the hand. That women must stay indoors. They must have. If they do go outside, they must wear the burqa or the purda, which is that gown, blue or white or black. Most of them wear blue, and with only a screen open, a mesh that they can see out in front, and that they cannot leave their house unless they have a chaperone. So, is that barbaric? That has been part of the Pashtunwali categories for centuries. This is nothing new. And it is this group that we need to unpack. The Taliban are not quite what people are portraying. They are not the group that they are not like Al Qaeda. And that's why we need to be careful, because in that bombing that happened on Thursday, you remember the bomb that killed 170 people, where it may be more because they're still dying from it. 13 U.S. soldiers were killed in that bombing there at the gate outside at the airport. The man who blew himself up was an IS Khorasan. ISK was not Taliban. In fact, 3 Taliban soldiers were wounded in that blast who were working alongside the Americans. So we're going to have to kind of change gears here now, because we're going to have to think of them as a little bit different than what we have been saying and what we have been portraying. Yes, they do call themselves Muslims. They are Islamic. They follow the Hanafi code, rule of law, but they predate Islam by quite a few centuries. And their biggest goal, and this is, let me repeat this, their biggest goal has always been not to take their brand or their theology or even their beliefs to the world. Their biggest goal is to get Afghanistan back into the hands of Afghanis. That is always
seriously.
They have always only had one goal, and that is to make Afghanistan Afghani. So that's why they have always been the thorn in the side for the British. When the British were there in the 1900s, they could never control were never able to control the Pashtun. There was no Taliban back then. Taliban were only created in 1994. But back in the early 1900s and the 1800s, and the British controlled that part of the world. That one tribe they could not control were the Pashtun. And the reason why was because of this Pashtunwali. They don't want anybody to have control over them. They wanted to be independent. And they also were a thorn in the side of the Russians when the Russians were there. The Russians were there from 1978 to 1992. So they were there for 14 years. They could not control the Pashtun. Nobody can control the Pashtun. Now, not all of Afghanistan is Pashtun. The northern half on the western side, I think that's, am I doing it right? Yeah, western side, where you all looking, would be the Turkmenistan Afghanis, and then on the eastern side would be the Uzbeki Afghanis. So the northern part of Afghanistan is not Pashtun. It's just from Kabul. If you put a line, Kabul just north of Kandahar, everything south of that. And their major city is Kandahar. So that is something we need to say from the get-go. We're not talking about a radical Muslim organization that wants to take over the world. They just want to take and give back Afghanistan to Afghanis. In fact, they do want to take northern Pakistan and bring it back home as well. So the Pakistanis are going to have to be concerned, because they would like to get Khorasan as a whole again. They would like to get the whole Pashtun diaspora also as a part of theirs. So that's just to begin, just to understand what we're dealing with here. But obviously, we need to unpack what has happened in the last 2 weeks since August the 15th, and what happened in the previous 10 days, because we need to look at those previous 10 days to know what's going on now.
All right, Dr. J, thank you for that background that you gave. I think that's very, very illuminatory. We need to have that historical background to set a kind of balanced view. I think that is actually good. But then I watched the video. I think this was after the Taliban takeover. We have the CNN reporters down there granting interviews and all of that. And when one of the Taliban soldiers was interviewed, it was being interviewed, and they were asking them a couple of questions. One of the things that is said is that yes, we've gotten this place right now, but please do care to know, if you care to know, this is not where we're going to be ending the whole thing. Our ambition, our desire, and our strive is to make sure that Islam get across all over the world. So what the man is saying, the Taliban soldier, right in that video, is saying at that point in time is that we've gotten this place where we are control now, we're taking charge now. But see, make no mistake, it's not just all about Afghanistan alone. We're thinking about taking over the whole world. Now, how do we
right there.
juxtapose this? Yeah, how do we actually juxtapose this?
That's typical CNN. Who is it they interviewed? Was he a spokesman for the Taliban?
No, one of the soldiers.
He was just a soldier on the ground. Now you stop and put yourself in that soldier's place. He has now seen the entire country come under fall in 10 days, way beyond any of their dreams. Suddenly, CNN comes and interviews him and says, we're going to take over the whole world. Stop and ask yourself, is that not typical of CNN? They always want something that's going to scare the whole world. Everybody calls them with CNN. They want to create news. And remember, did any of the spokesmen that are in the presidential palace say that?
No, I've not heard that from them yet. Yeah.
Why have CNN not reported that?
Well, I wouldn't know. Probably they felt that this is obvious. It's not something that they need to ask any longer.
Because stop and think yourself. When they control for 5 years, you remember the Taliban have already been in control. They controlled from 1996 to 2021. Did they have any expression? Did they ever go outside their borders? Did they have any group? Did they themselves? Now, Al Qaeda did, but see, Al Qaeda is not Taliban, and Al Qaeda did them a disservice. And you got to remember, that's why once burned, they're not going to allow that to happen again, because it was because of Al Qaeda that they were then destroyed. The Taliban rue the fact that they ever let Al Qaeda have that much control, and I don't even think they knew what Al Qaeda's attention was. Because what did Al Qaeda do? What happened? Where did they go when, as soon as the United States came and attacked the Taliban? They went down to Pakistan. That's where they were, and that's where the Americans found them, and that's where Osama bin Laden was killed, and that's where Ayman Zawahiri finally died. But not in Afghanistan. So I think we need to be careful about just the sensationalist reports that you're hearing right now. One soldier on the ground, and CNN now makes him a spokesman for the entire Taliban. Look at the history of the Taliban, and look at their categories, and look at what they desire and what they want for the world. And then ask yourself, why in the world would they want to take over the whole world when all that they have always been asking is, we want Afghanistan back? All right? So that's why we need to be careful here. And I think you're going to see that the Taliban will not allow any other group do what Al Qaeda did and destroyed their whole plan.
Okay, so Dr. G, this is a question. Would you consider this group a political group or a religious group, or are they a combination of both?
I don't think you could separate the two. They are not like we are. We must not impose Western standards on them. In any group that is Islamic in nature, it is political and theological. The two go hand in hand. We separate the two, and that's why the confusion is, I think, many times. But to understand the Taliban, you need to look at history and just look and see what they have done and who they are and where they've come. You also need to understand who exactly and how stupid the Americans have been in this whole venture. And now I'm an American, so therefore I have all the right to call myself my country stupid. But I do that. I don't do it just for the sake of creating a reaction. We, I think, in the West have always misunderstood. Whenever we go into a foreign country, we do not understand that country. And I think in this case, we have misunderstood what's going on in Afghanistan. Listen, I grew up in that area. This is my area of expert. This is where I spent all my time. I spent all my time amongst people from we call this the Indian subcontinent. I was born there. I grew up there. I spent my first 17 years there. I know the area very, very well. I understand it probably a lot better than any other area of the world. And that's why I think Americans need to be careful about some of the claims they make. One of the things I'm hearing is, and this is the surprise that surprised everybody, how could a country like America spend 20 years? Remember, we were there 20 years. That's not a small time.
Yeah.
$2 trillion. That's not a small amount.
That's true.
And lost 2,800 soldiers, or 2,400 soldiers, excuse me. That's not a small amount either. So we invested an enormous amount into this country. And what happened in 10 days between August 5th and August 15th? In 10 days, it all unraveled. It all fell to pieces. After 20 years of being there, we lost this country in 10 days. Why? Now, I want to ask you, Costa, why? Why do you think we lost it so quickly?
Okay, so from my point of view, I felt that, number one, the people that they went on to meet, I'm talking about the Taliban now, and the people of Afghan, also the Afghan themselves, but most especially the Taliban, I believe that they are resilient. I believe that they are not people that give up so easily. I believe that you're just waiting for a time when all of this will be said and done, when the Americans will be tired of all of the things they're doing, and then they just take over. So I'm seeing a people who would not give up very, very easily. People that would not want to give up, even if you try to push them to the wall, they are still not wanting to give up. So that's the way I see them, and that's the reason why I think the Americans lost.
Okay, hold on a minute. Was there any battle? Was there a battle for Kabul? Was there a battle for Herat? Was there a battle for Mazar-e-Sharif? Was there a battle for Kandahar or Jalalabad or Lashkargah? Do you know of any battles that happened in any of those six cities? Sorry, it's the 6 cities that we need to look at.
Okay.
Did you hear of any battles? Did you hear of any soldiers being killed? Did you hear of any? Did you know of any battles going on in Kabul?
No.
Exactly. Why hasn't anybody asked that question? The Taliban walked in without hardly. There was a few battles in Lashkargah and 1 or 2 in Herat, 1 or 2, and there still is one valley that still has not been conquered, and that battle is still engaging. That's up in the Uzbeki area. But other than that, why has no one asked, what in the world could they just walk in and take over 6 cities and over 165 aircraft? I think it's like 3,000 Humvees are now under their control. They have 200,000 M16s, all the military equipment. They've just been given. They didn't have to fight for those weapons. They didn't have to fight for those airplanes. 167 airplanes are now under their control, including Black Hawk helicopters. You've not heard of this, have you?
So what you're saying, Dr. J, is that these guys, the Taliban, okay, from the beginning, they are not actually wanting to fight for anything religious. They just want their land back, right?
Of course they want to fight, but why didn't they fight? And how? Okay. That after 20 years, and remember, the Afghan military is the largest military in the history of Afghanistan. 300,000 fighting men, 300,000 well equipped in 9 military aircraft, 9 military bases all over around Afghanistan. Huge base, the Bagram base, one of the largest in the world. All of that was under their control. How is it that all of that was given up without a fight? Without a fight.
Okay, so Dr. J, I'm going to do something at this moment. First off, before we're going to be going for a break, but this break is going to be a video in between. It's one of the videos of an interview. This is not CNN now. This is another media, and we have a reporter, I think it's based in Kabul right there, interviewing some of these soldiers as well. I mean, now I know you told me, the soldiers are different from the spokesman, But then we have a soldier who can speak actually about 5 languages, and you can see the soldiers now. I mean, this group of soldiers, this a different breed of Taliban fighters now, wearing the U.S. camouflage and all that. But then, before that, I want to inform folks, please, if you have questions for Dr. J on this particular topic, please, you can put the questions right there in the comment section, and then Dr. J will be able to address them. So as I'm seeing Dr. J, I'm going to play this video. It's about, I think, 3 to 4 minutes. We're going to take a look at this video. Then I want a reaction on it, because from that particular video, these are Talibans and these are soldiers also. And what they are saying is very similar to what we've had earlier, not from the presentation you've made, because you're trying to make a clarification now. But from what they said, they are like fighters for Islam. They're ready to die. I mean, this is very much like the narratives that we'll be having all along. So let's go for that short break with this video. And then once we're done with the video, Dr. J, you're going to comment on this. And then if you have questions for Dr. J, you can actually ask those questions. So here comes the video.
From a distance, these men on patrol look like NATO soldiers wearing American tactical gear. But if you look closer, you'll see that these fighters are from the other side of Afghanistan's war. This is the Taliban's elite Badri 313 Brigade. It was founded by Badruddin Haqqani, who was killed in a US drone strike in 2012. He was the son of Taliban co-founder Jalaluddin Haqqani. Now, his unit is facing off against American soldiers at Kabul's airport, wearing the same kit the Americans are leaving behind. The Taliban says Badri 313 is the future of a group whose fighters have looked like this since the Taliban first emerged in 1994. If you're wondering why these Taliban fighters don't look like your average Taliban fighter, well, it's because of a concerted effort by the Taliban leadership to unite disparate Taliban groups into one unified fighting force.
So we have our own country and we need an army.
Sohaib Saeed is an officer in Badri 313. He's fluent in 5 languages and is a new type of Taliban fighter.
First thing, you have to be a martyrdom seeker. You know, a mustashid, we say mustashid, and the foreigner says the suicide attackers. You need to be a martyrdom seeker, mustashid, to be a member of Badri 313 unit. It is important. All of the members of this unit are istishhadiyin, the martyrdom seekers. All of us, we want to be martyred in the way of Allah. And the value of us is to save our country, to save our people, and to save our values. And in that way, we are ready to be martyred.
Aren't all Taliban martyrdom seekers or fidain?
Actually, all of them are like that. But as a unit, organizedly, this unit is specified for that mission. I lost my brother, and I am ready to lose myself as well. But I have values. I want to defend my values. Values more important for me than my life.
The unit has an estimated 5,000 fighters who go through rigorous training in urban warfare and how to conduct suicide attacks. Some scholars say that suicide attacks are un-Islamic. How would you respond to that?
The Taliban has a council of religious leaders that decides on such matters, including seeking martyrdom. Before we do anything, we consult with the religious leaders to sanction such attacks.
Regardless of what they wear and how they look, these men are still the Taliban, committed to establishing what they say is Islamic law in Afghanistan. And with the Americans leaving, these fighters might find their mission changing from seeking martyrdom to ensuring safety, security, and peace for all Afghans. Ali Mustafa, TRT World, in Kabul, Afghanistan.
All right, so there you have it, Dr. J. That is the video. So what do you have to say about this, Dr. J?
Yeah, this is a group that was what they called them Badri 313. The reason they give that name to them, it comes from the Battle of Badr, which happened in 624 in in Saudi Arabia. This is when Muhammad, the first battle that Muhammad ever engaged in, when he went with 300 and defeated 900 at the Battle of Badr. So they call themselves Badri in that case. And they also look at the date that happened. That happened on March the 13th. So March is the third month. 13th is a day. That's why it's called 313. And it's a what we would call an elite group from within the Taliban. Now, did you notice those? Did you look at those uniforms carefully?
Yeah.
They're brand new. There's no stuffing marks on them. There's no wear and tear on them. They're brand new. They looked rather uncomfortable, didn't they?
Yeah.
The helmets weren't quite right on the head. Those all, where do you think they got those from? They've only had them a few days.
Yeah, from the reports, I think they got it from the Americans. I mean, probably the leftover from the Americans.
Americans. You said that, Costa. What did happen? Okay.
Yeah,
what happened?
the Americans are leaving.
August 15th. What happened? Those 10 days.
Yeah.
You know what happened. Okay, let me just back up. Maybe you don't know what happened, but for all your listeners, you need to understand. In August 5th, so 10 days before they took over Kabul, they first went to take over Turkmenistan, and they took over Uzbeki. These not Turkmenistan, sorry, the northern parts of Afghanistan. They did that strategically because that is not their area, but that's not where the Pashtuns live. That's where the Turkmeni lives, and that's where the Uzbeki lives. Okay? Turkmeni are in the east, Turkmenis are in the west. Sorry, let's do it the other way around. Turkmenis are in the west, Uzbekis are in the east of the northern part of Afghanistan. Mazar-e-Sharif is their big city. And the Taliban did that purposely to show all the other Afghanis that they were going to their weakest area first and letting the weakest cities basically accede to them. That was hugely strategic. Once they did that, and they just walked into the cities, and what did the Afghani soldiers do? They took off their uniforms, they put on Afghani dress, and they handed their weapons to the Taliban. The Americans didn't do a thing. These are all American weapons. Those are all American uniforms. They're all straight out of the package, but they were all from Afghani soldiers. These are the 300,000 soldiers I was talking about. These 300,000 soldiers have been trained for 20 years to be made into the largest fighting force with the best equipment. That's the best equipment in the world you're looking at. Those are Humvees, 3,000 Humvees they were given. 167 aircraft they were given, helicopters, not sophisticated aircraft, mind you. These are very, if you look at the aircraft, these are just small propeller planes. But they were given 3 C-130s. These are sophisticated. Humvee, not Apache. They were given Blackhawks. Blackhawks are sophisticated helicopters. And they were then trained for 20 years to basically to maintain and control the Taliban. But look and see who is it that was in charge of these soldiers. The people in charge of the soldiers were all from the cities, the 6 cities. The people who were in the military, who were made up these soldiers, were from the countryside. So what are we talking about? 80% of Afghanistan is mountainous. And that's where the Taliban live, and that's where all the populace live. 80% of the populace do not live in the cities. Only 20% live in the cities. And the 20% is where the Americans were. Is where the Europeans were, where the British were, where the Germans were, the Australian. They were all in the cities because that was the only place that they could maintain security. And this is well known, what I'm telling you, Costa. This is nothing new that I'm telling you, all right?
Okay,
yeah.
So
the soldiers that they had to hire were all from the countryside.
Okay.
And the soldiers, listen, the soldiers were getting salary, they were getting uniforms, they were giving houses to live in, their families could move in to those bases, and they were given food, and they were given all the provisions. Who would become a soldier? But their allegiance was always to the Taliban. Remember, you had what they call blue on blue attacks all the time, where these soldiers would go into a mess hall and just start killing American soldiers. You remember this? That happened time and time again. And so they finally had to have two completely different camps. They couldn't have Afghanis and Americans together because none of the Americans could trust the Afghani soldiers. This was because they were all Taliban. They weren't Taliban in that they were mentally Taliban. They were just under, they knew that all their villages and all their towns were controlled by the Taliban, and all their relatives were under their control, which meant at any time they could, their family could be in danger. So they were happy to get the weapons. They were happy to get the salaries. They were happy to get the training. And then when the Taliban came and just walked into their towns, they took off their uniforms, gave it to the Taliban, and gave them their weapons. Did you notice the guys? What were they holding in their hands? Those were M16s. You don't get M16s if you're the enemy. Did you notice what they were driving? Those Humvees. Where did they get the Humvees from? From the Americans? No, not from the Americans. They got it from the military. And this was well known. This is what was happening. For 10 days, we saw this happening. City after city started to fall. Mazar-e-Sharif first fell. Then Herat fell. Then Kandahar fell. Then Jalalabad fell. Then Lashkar fell. And finally, on the 15th of August, the Taliban just walked into Kabul and they went right to the presidential palace. And the president of Afghanistan could just zipped out to the airport and fled over to Uzbekistan, where he still is. Within hours, he was in Uzbekistan. He saw what was going on. All the Afghanis saw what was going on. The Americans did not. And that's why everybody was caught with their pants down, including Joe Biden. Now, how stupid can you get? If you're going to announce we're leaving by September 1st, which means August 31st, we're going to leave, and you tell the whole world this, what do you think the Taliban are going to do? They're saying, oh, okay, they're no longer here. We're just going to take over. Let's see if they resist. And they knew they wouldn't resist because every one of those soldiers that they were supposed to resist against them had family in the villages. And they didn't want their families to be killed. So they just took off their weapons and handed their guns. There was no fighting. The Taliban walked in. There were a few pockets. I will admit, there were a few pockets of fighting around Jalalabad and around Kandahar. But other than that, there was no fighting. And certainly no fighting in Kabul, the largest. Now, obviously, everybody was caught by surprise, especially the Americans. Joe Biden was in Camp David on vacation when it all happened. He was on vacation, proving how stupid this was. Even he did not understand what was going on, and it's obviously his military planners were not aware because they let him go on vacation. You don't go on vacation when your whole military is being looked like idiots. And they had to quickly send back 6,000 troops just to take over the airport. And that's where they are today. And they'll be there tomorrow. And they'll finally leave on Tuesday. So everybody's going to be gone on Tuesday. Now, what you saw in all these reports where suddenly everybody woke up in these cities and they realized that the Taliban had now control of the whole country. And everybody realized, yikes, I'm supposed to be out of here. I've been working with the Americans. I've been working with the UK. I've been in translation. I've been on the bases. I've been cooks. I've been whatever. Anybody that had any attachment to any of the Americans or the Europeans realized that they were bait for the Taliban. That means, remember this concept of revenge.
Yeah.
That's one of the three major concepts. Revenge is what they're talking about. And the revenge, let me get the name for it so I have the right name. Revenge is called Badal. They realized that Badal was going to be against them and their whole family. That's why you saw thousands and tens of thousands of people just streaming to the airport.
Yeah, I was going to show you that particular.
There were no Americans there at the airport. There was no one to control the airport. And people just started jumping on planes and they started grabbing onto the wheel wells. And you saw those two bodies fall from the sky. That's the desperation. One of them was a soccer player, a young soccer player who was part of the junior team, and he fell to his death. Why do you grab onto wheel of planes unless, of course, you realize I didn't realize what was going on. See, the people in the city were living in a la-la land, as far as I can see. They were not at all aware of just how weak the military was and how weak just how weak their whole government was. Their government really was a puppet government of the United States. It was created by the United States. It was supported by the United States. They brought all of these trinkets to the cities, and they only brought them to the cities. They brought schools, they brought hospitals, they set up all kinds of NGOs, but they were all in the cities, and that's where the Europeans were, and that's where the Americans were, because that's the only place they could safeguard them. They didn't bring them out to the countryside. They would take forays into the country, and then they come back to the city, go forays into the country, and come back to the city, because the Americans could only safeguard the cities. Because remember, almost all of Afghanistan is mountainous, and you cannot control the mountains from the air. This is not Jordan. I'm sorry, this is not Iraq. This is not Syria. Iraq and Syria are easy to control because you have flat land and no clouds. And when there's flat land and no clouds, you just control everything for the drones, and the drones stay up there 24 hours a day. You don't have to have pilots. And the people who are controlling the drones live in Houston. They're in Texas, 6,000 miles away, and they take shifts. The drones don't take shifts. They just come back to get refueled, and another drone takes their place. So you can imagine that's how it's so easy to control the Middle East. That's why we were able to wipe out the Islamic State so quickly, mostly with drones and with a few air power. And look what happened when this bomb went off on Thursday. By Saturday, they had already killed the men who were responsible for it using a drone. And they used the drone to very good effect. Americans are good at that. That's one thing we have, and that is we have technology. But that was because they were able to follow the Jeep as it was on the road. And once it was away from the city, once it was away from people and civilians, they just shot it with a Hellfire missile and destroyed everybody inside the truck. And they killed the two planners. How they know they're the planners, I don't know. And I'm wondering if this is more, again, American propaganda. I would love to know how they knew that those are the two planners. Because when you say we're going to get the men responsible, well, the man responsible blew himself up. He wasn't alive. So in some ways, you've already got the man who was responsible. But anyhow, from here on out, I think there's going to be an awful lot. All we're going to be able to do is drone strikes and air strikes. But we may not even need to do that because there's something else looming that no one's talking about. Who are the people who have not left? What group of people, of Europeans, are still there in large numbers, and their embassy is still open?
All right. So, Dr. J, now, this is the
answer.
yeah. I'm going to be asking more before we begin to address a couple of comments right here. So here's the next question I'm going to be asking Dr. J. It's a kind of follow-up from what we've discussed so far. So how dangerous are the Taliban compared to the ISIS, ISWAP, Al-Qaeda, and the rest? How dangerous are these guys?
They're not very dangerous. Not for us, not for you, not for me. ISIS is very dangerous. And so Al-Qaeda, because they are after soft targets. The Taliban are not interested in more than just Taliban. They are interested in Khorasan. That means extending their borders. Now, that fellow that you had on the film there, they're martyrs to the cause. Every Taliban fighter is a martyr. They will die for their country. They will die for their people. That is part of their ethos. That is nothing new. I don't know why everybody's surprised by that. But do you notice the weapons they were holding and the uniforms they were wearing? What happens when those weapons start to jam? Or what happens when they need spare parts? Where are they going to go get spare parts for the Humvees? Where are they going to get spare parts for the Black Hawk helicopters? Just a problem. Once things start to go wrong, everything's going to start falling to pieces. So don't worry about those fancy weapons. Those weapons aren't going to last long. They're probably going to last for maybe 1 or 2 years. Then they're going to start to fall. They're going to start to jam. They're going to start to need spare parts. And more than likely, they're going to have to look elsewhere. But you haven't answered my question. Who was left in Kabul? Whose embassy was still open? The Russians.
Okay.
There's no Russians left. The Russians are all still there. The Russian embassy is still open. So who do you think now will be the next major player in Afghanistan? There are going to be two of them, because who sent a contingent to Qatar to negotiate with the Taliban? The Chinese. So what's going to happen now is that the Chinese and Russians now are going to take the place of the Americans. And you're going to have a whole new set of players. And almost all of those weapons that the Taliban have will start to break, and will start to wear down, and will start to need replacements. They're going to replace them with more AK-47s, and they're going to replace them with the Russian. You'll start to see a quick changeover. It'll be from American to Russia. That makes sense, because Russia's right next door, and Russia is interested in the Taliban because of for security reasons. They want to have a safe border. They want to have a safe southern neighbor, and also they want to have a Taliban that will control the IS. Remember, one bomb on Thursday was that bomb on Thursday made all the news. The Taliban stopped 5 bombs from going off in the last week and a half. 5 bombs were shut down because of the Taliban. The Taliban do not want these suicide bombers. They do not want them destroying the evacuation. They want the people to be evacuated. Why were there 3 Taliban soldiers there who were wounded when that bomb went off? Why were they right next to the American soldiers? They were working together. Remember the Taliban. What did the Taliban say? That's why you were listening to CNN and you were getting all excited about CNN, because CNN were talking to a soldier on the ground. You weren't listening to the spokesman. The spokesman there in the palace said, you can leave. We will let you leave, but you must leave by August 31st. So almost all of the people that are fleeing to the airport have to go through roadblocks. Those roadblocks are maintained by the Taliban. If the Taliban were against the Americans, they would have stopped everybody and sent them home. But 105,000 have been evacuated in just the last 2 weeks. You don't get 105,000 evacuated without the Taliban's consent.
Okay, so Dr. J, what do you have to say about, I know you mentioned this in passing, but what would you have to say about those guys, especially the ones that are running after the aircraft, wanting to join? I mean, these are not Americans, just like you said initially. These are Afghans. Why are they trying to run away? And I want to believe that not every one of these people work with the US. I mean, it's not every one of these people that you have right running after the aircraft that are working for the US. So why would the people of a particular nation want to run out of that nation? Immediately the US, the US presence is going out of, that particular country. I mean, what could have been that anxiety? What would have been that fear that would have propelled them to want to run out of that particular location? What would you say about that?
Every one of them were people that were caught by surprise, and they realized that the Taliban are now going to introduce Islamic Sharia law. They're going to introduce mainly Pashtunwali law. And the Pashtunwali law, the third most important category under Pashtunwali law, is revenge. And they know that anybody who has been found to have worked with the Americans or the British or the Germans or the Norwegians or any of the Europeans and the Australians will be killed. And remember, those people you saw running were mostly men.
Yeah, that's true.
There were very few women. They were running.
I didn't even see any women there. I mean, I see all men.
So what does that tell you?
Well, what I see from
their lives, because they are the ones that are going to be hunted down and captured. And this was already going on for 10 days. And certainly the Afghans saw this happening, because this was happening in Mazar Sharif. This was happening in Herat. They were going the Taliban were going door to door. They were asking for anybody that had women that were under the age of 25. Sorry, over the age of 15.
Yeah, 15, yeah.
How many women they had, because they want them for wives. This is typical Taliban. This is normal. This is what they've always done. They always take the women that they need for their soldiers. And they, of course, these people saw the Taliban are coming back again. We're going to be under Taliban rule again. And anybody who has worked with the Americans, who has had any contact with America, will be fair game. And especially the young men, because they would all be fingered. And remember, in almost every one of these cities, neighbors were fingering other people and said, here's they are, here's the house. And then they were just executing them. There was no trial. And this is the Taliban. This is typical Afghanistan. And this is why you need to be careful that this is something that predates Islam. Now, they call themselves Muslims, and they are Muslims. I don't doubt that they are Muslims, but they're not really following Islamic law. And that's why you notice when the reporter asked them, do you believe in suicide bombings? The guy changed it to martyrdom. Did you pick that up?
Yeah.
He didn't say suicide bombings. He says we are martyrs. Martyr means you kill yourself for your tribe, or you kill yourself for your whatever it is that you're going to war for. That's totally different. And we would say the same thing. All of us would be martyrs for the cause if we were good soldiers.
But Dr. J, these guys are very clear. Even though they say they are martyrs, they are mentioning Islam. They are talking about Allah, and it's not just about. From what they are saying, it's not just all about the Afghan people alone, their country and all of that. They are saying, okay, yes, we are mutashid, okay? These are people that have decided that they are going to die for the cause of Allah. So it's going beyond now their country, okay? Yeah, they have an interest in protecting their country and all that.
Where did he say once that we're going to go beyond our country? Why did you just say?
It did not specifically say that. But when it says... No, I'm not changing it. What I'm saying is that if he's saying is a martyr for what? I mean, if you are dying for your country,
martyrdom against anybody who's taken over our country, which is exactly what the Taliban have been saying since the Russians were there. Listen, if you just listen, putting words in their mouths all the time, I think, Costa, you're as much of a problem as everybody. Everybody wants to say we're going to be killed by the Taliban. That needs to shut down. They are not interested in conquering the world. IS is, Al-Qaeda is, but not the Taliban. This is not, they did not, you just put words in his mouth there to say, we are going to be mutashids and take over the whole world. Don't say that. That is not true. And you will see that the Taliban have a huge problem on their hands. There is a famine happening right now. Did you know this? For the last 2 years, there has been a famine in Afghanistan. The crops have failed enormously. And the only reason that Afghanistan has been able to survive are because of the NGOs, the Europeans, who have been bringing and feeding 70% of the population. All of those NGOs have now left in 2 weeks. They've gone. That means there's going to be humanitarian crisis on a scale we've not seen. And that's going to happen in the next 2 months. And the Taliban do not and are not prepared for this. They do not know how to feed people. They only know how to feed their own families. They do not know how to create massive and even do monetary and do engineering projects. They don't know how to build dams. They don't know how to irrigate. They don't know any of this because they are fighters. This is something that is going to cause huge disarray in Afghanistan. And I've not seen one report on this yet from CNN or NBC or CBS. No one's talking about the humanitarian crisis. And what scares me more than anything else is come Tuesday, in 2 days, everybody in the West say, good, we're finished. We're out of there. Everybody's out. Whatever happens to Afghanistan, it's their fault. That's what scares me.
Okay, Dr. J, I know we've taken much of your time. In fact, it's just 1 hour right now. We have to have stopped this about 15 minutes ago so we can entertain, comment on all that. But then we have a comment right there, so we'll be glad if we can actually address this comment. So this is actually coming from, it's a long one actually. It's coming from Ochuko John Dabint or BMT. And it says, the wise man has spoken, Joe Biden's decision on this. Why are Afghanistan Muslims running away from their own countries? The Taliban want full-blown Islam Sharia law. Why all this noisy all about? Okay, I mean, I think he's trying to talk about noise right there. Why are they Afghans? Why are the Afghans afraid of Islam, Islamic way of life? It truly they love Islam. Generally, Muslims are not happy in their own Islamic countries, but want to convert the countries they found grace into Islamic countries they run from. They are not happy in Gaza, they are not happy in Egypt, and then it goes on and on and on. So what do you have to say about this, Dr. J?
Now, what's his name?
Ochuko actually
you are correct, John. Ochuko, and he's actually quoting a very famous meme that's going all over the world, and I've got it right. And that is, the Muslims are not ever happy in their own country. They always move to the West. Notice all of these refugees, none of them went to Saudi Arabia, none of them went to Qatar or Bahrain, none of them went to Pakistan. Well, some are going to Pakistan, but none of them went to Islamic countries. They all went to Western countries, primarily United States and also Europe. And then what happens when they get to those countries? Well, then they start to inculcate Islamic law. They start to live like Muslims, like what they're used to, and they want the country to become like what they've flown. That's a legitimate comment. And that would be a comment that I would be careful. You know, the Afghanis who now have come, what are they going to do? Are they going to adhere to Western laws and norms? Are they going to bring and actually participate in the Western in a culture, and are they going to accept the Western culture that now houses them? We will see. I would suggest that most of these refugees, these 100, whatever the final total is going to be, 120,000 of them that have fled, I would suggest that most of them have already adhered to Western ideals because they're living in the cities. That's why they're in the cities. They're used to McDonald's. They want to have a lifestyle that's Western. They want cars. They want refrigerators. They want education. They want jobs that'll give salaries. And so they are fleeing to have more of that. And remember, most of the Afghanis that you have met, or the Afghanis that I have met, do want to come to the West because of what the West offers. They want the education. They want the jobs. They want the freedom to choose. There's a few of them, and just a minority of them, who then would like to recreate Afghanistan in the West. And that is a valid criticism that your gentleman writer is writing in. That's a legitimate criticism. And all of us need to say, if you come to the West, then you must adhere to Western concepts and also live by a Judeo-Christian environment. Because what do you think the West is? Why is it we're not like Afghanistan? Why is it we're not like the rest of the Islamic world? It's because we don't follow Islamic concepts. We do not follow Taliban concepts. We don't have this concept of revenge. Oh, you have to be careful. Why do you think we were in Afghanistan? That was revenge. And that's why if they're going to come to the West, they are going to have to adhere to our views, our culture, and also our moral fabric.
Okay, so one more question, Dr. J, before we let you go. Here's the question. What do you think the church in Afghanistan should feel like? Do you think they should be afraid? Do you feel they will be threatened? Do you think that it's all well with them? I'm talking about the church as a whole in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and this is a huge concern, Corredi, and it is a concern for me. I'm sure it's a concern for all Christians. It does not look well for the church in Afghanistan. Now, when we say church, it's not a visible church. It's all underground. It has always been underground. And the only visible part was in Kabul, and I think there was a church that was visible in Herat. And they were mostly made up of Iranians because they're over on the eastern side. And I think, I'm sorry, on the western side, not the eastern side, the western side. And I think this is something that scares me, because we are getting reports from pastors who are in Afghanistan who are moving from house to house to house to house because the Taliban are looking for them. The Taliban know their names. The Taliban, and what's really tragic is the neighbors are saying, they're here, they're here, they're here. They're telling the Taliban where they are. And that saddens me enormously. So it looks like the Afghani citizens there are fingering the Christians. They want the Christians killed, and the pastors will be killed. But that's, in some ways, that's par for the course for Christians, aren't they? We get killed everywhere. And for 2,000 years, that has been what we have always assumed would happen, and it looks like it's going to happen again. So the church may not survive, but the great thing about it, if you take a look right next door, look at the country next door, look at Iran. Remember what has happened to the church there. It is now the fastest growing church in the world. And that's all because of persecution. Persecution brings out the best in Christians. And persecution tends to force us to stop depending on ourselves, depending on our own security, and falling back into the arms of Jesus Christ. Amen. And so I'm hoping and I'm praying for the church, for the pastors, for the Christians that are there in Afghanistan. And I'm hoping that what happened in Iran will also happen to them, that actually people will start coming in droves. because Islam is its own worst advertisement. That explains why so many people were rushing to the plains. They realize that they don't want to live under Islamic law. They don't want to live under Pashtunwali law. They don't want to live under the Taliban. They have seen what the Taliban do. And the Taliban shut down society for all women and make it very difficult for any minorities, and especially anybody who has had any contact with Americans or Europeans, or especially Christians, because Christianity they see as a rival religion.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're going to be wrapping it up from there. Oh my God, there seems to be. Do you want us to take this question, Dr. J? One more question right here. If you don't want us to do that, no problem. I'm very much concerned about your time. Okay, all right. So this seems to be a comment. This is coming from Ray Bogart. Ray Bogart is actually saying, why do some people say Sharia law is misunderstood? That it is not, that it's not that draconian. That only certain groups have a bad interpretation. I don't understand. I understand this to be a comment. I don't know if this is in a response to what has been said before, or probably is trying to respond to somebody in the comment section. What do you have to say about it, Dr. J?
I think Ray Bogart, there is a confusion as to how you define Sharia law. And I think the best way to do that, Ray, is to just go back to the original concepts. And there are 4 schools of Islamic law: the Hanafi, the Hanbali, the Maliki, and the Shafi school. Each one of them is different. So that causes even more confusion. And so what you're saying, and I think, Ray, why people are making this comment that it's not that draconian, it just depends on which one of those 4 schools you live under. The Maliki and the Shafi school are not that draconian, but the Hanafi and the Hanbali are hugely draconian. And it's the Hanafi school that the Taliban follow. So that will be draconian. It will be a lot more, it will not be pleasant. And Ray, if you think it's not draconian, then go and live and move to Afghanistan and see how you feel living there. Or just move to Iran and feel if you like to live under Shiite law, which is outside those 4 because they're Shiite. I don't see many people moving to Muslim countries at all, especially Muslim countries that institute Islamic law. Pakistan. And so, Ray, I would guess the best answer to you is, if you don't think it's draconian, then feel free to immigrate there and see how you would like to live there under that kind of law. Are you willing to live under a law that stipulates that if you are caught stealing a loaf of bread, you get your hands cut off? Are you willing to live under a law that stipulates if you're caught in adultery, you're taken out into the public and you're given 100 lashes in the public? Humiliated. Are you willing to live under that?
Yes.
Are you willing to live? I mean, I can go on if you want me to, because those ones are straight out of the Quran. All 4 schools of law practice right there.
I think Ray actually believes what you believe. I think you're on the same page you Ray, Dr. J. From his comment, Ray actually believes.
Ray, because he asked the question, or she asked the question, and I meant, listen, it may not seem draconian until you live under it.
Yeah, he actually believes the Sharia law is draconian. That's what he's actually saying. And then we have one more question here. This is coming from Kofi Asari, all the way from Ghana. He's asking the question, Dr. J, in your opinion, which of the Islamic group are practicing true Islam?
I would suggest the ISIS was the closest to what I see. If you look at what Muhammad did, if you look and see how the early Islam treated women, treated families, treated anybody that was against them, treated critics of Islam, that ISIS was probably, and the reason why I say this is the ISIS always supported what they did with scripture. They always went back to the Quran, and they always went back to Islamic law. So they always supported it. They didn't just do it willy-nilly and then just say, live with it. They said, no, we do this because God has spoken. We follow what God has said. And I don't see, that's why I'm saying we need to be careful of the Taliban, because they are not truly Islamic. They are Islamic. I'm not saying they're not, but they are more Pashtunwali. Most of their laws are Pashtunwali laws, which are a little bit different than Islamic laws.
All right, so Dr. J, we really want to thank you for your time. We've taken about 10 minutes out of the normal time. We ought to have ended this program. So we really want to thank you and appreciate you for this time, even though you're supposed to be on your bed right now, resting and all that, but you still come on the show. So really want to appreciate you. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Also, everyone, really want to thank you. Everyone who's been on the program right from the beginning of this program, really want to thank you guys for your patience and also for your interest. Of course, it's a topic that is very, very much talked about right now, especially in the world, is of concern to a whole lot of people. And then we need to also talk about it, especially shedding more light and, concerning the issue and giving the right perspective. So thank you, folks. Thank you for those that are praying for us. Thank you for those that are also supporting us. Really appreciate all of that. So Dr. J, thank you very much. And we hope that we're going to be having when next we call you, we hope we're going to be having you on the program. Thank you very much. God bless you. All right, folks. So if you want to contact us, you can actually do that on Facebook. If you want to contact us on Facebook, it's actually Seasoned Apologist on Facebook. If you want to contact us on Instagram, on Twitter, you can actually do that. That is the link on the screen. As you can see right now, you can contact us on Facebook. Make sure you like our Facebook page. Also on Instagram, make sure you follow us on Instagram. Actually, also on Twitter, you can actually follow us on Twitter, and that is at Seasoned A. Also, our YouTube channel, if you're not subscribed right now, you can click the subscription button, and also you can reach out to us on WhatsApp. If you're reaching out to us on WhatsApp, you need to put up the plus icon. So that's 234 plus 234 8127 999 591. Would you like to send us an email? You probably want to make an inquiry. Yes, you can do that by sending your email to info@seasonedapologist.com, and that is info@seasonedapologist.com. If you want to send us a message, or you want to check out one of the things that we're doing on our website, you want to see the articles written and all that, you can also go to seasonedapologist.com. That is www.seasonedapologist.com. And that is what we have today for you. And hopefully next week, you'll be able to join us. Next week, we're going to be talking about another important topic of discussion. And if you want to join us next week, we usually do this 1 p.m. Nigerian time. And then based on the guests we're going to be having on the show, we're going to be converting the time to, to the time of the guests we're going to be having, either if they're from the US, from the UK, from Saudi Arabia. I hope we're going to be having somebody from there. We've not had anybody from Saudi Arabia yet. All right. So, but based on the guests that we're going to be having, we're going to be converting the time to the guest time. So you have the two timing, you have the Nigerian time, you also have that of the guest as well. Again, thank you for being on the show. Really want to appreciate you. My name is Corey Delawain. Please stay safe. Coronavirus is still out there. Please stay safe, and also keep praying. Thank you very much, and God bless you. See you guys next week.
We love you, Lord, we love you. Father, we give you all the glory. You are my rock, my strength, and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace, and my shield. You are my everything. You are